Welcome to Generational Differences with Beckham and Brett. All right, and we are back for another episode, and this is going to be our alliteration episode with warming, wasps, and Waymo.
Yeah, I just picked those out of random. I didn't know they were gonna make such a good alliteration.
Yeah. So, let's see. So starting off, like you want to talk about global warming and
Yeah,
then all the different types of wasps out there, and
the
then
parasitic wasps, to be
the
exact.
joys of riding in Waymo.
Yeah, of how fun they are really, and of how they work.
All right. Um, so, so I guess to start off, we're going to talk about global warming. I'm going to let you kick that off because I don't really know where you wanted to start with it or
Okay.
what where we were going to go with that. So go ahead.
Okay, so global warming is basically Greta Thunberg was all about it, and she's still going on with her little speeches. But basically, it's when we put CO2, which is a greenhouse gas, you all know what greenhouses are, they're hot, into the atmosphere. That kind of makes that glass dome effect. That basically makes it so that a dome effect that keeps in all of the hotness from the sun, and it makes it so that the Earth gets warmer and warmer. And since that happens, evaporation happens faster, which makes bigger storms, which is very bad. And it also kind of thaws out uh, some types of permafrost, which has bacteria, which makes CO2 when it eats, and then it's just this entire thing. So we started a cycle that we could end, but right now we're just accelerating it. It's a really hard subject, and a lot of corrupt governments at this time have been trying to cover it up. Now, I will say a few of the okay things that technically are okay considered because they don't put as much CO2 or no CO2 in the atmosphere or any greenhouse gas. Hydroelectricity, which is basically dams that spin little turbines that basically make it so that and then they make I think like this and the spinning energy. I forgot what is it you call it, Dad?
Spinning energy. Well, the hydroelectric dams, you're right. They do have turbines in them that spin and they generate electricity from spinning.
Yeah, basically, and it kind of like a metronome. You have to turn it up to like get
Yeah.
it to work. So that's one thing. And then wind turbines, which is basically the same of water turbines but replaced with wind. Solar, which harnesses the power of the UV rays and then turns them into electricity. Very easy subject, but it's hard to kind of say it out if somebody doesn't know what it is. Actually, you can just look on YouTube of how to do it. There's like hundreds of videos of that. But basically, UV is a higher energy source wave of light. When that comes down, we can harness it through little technologies that basically make it so that the electricity can be used for more lights, but not UV lights. It's a very easy subject. And yeah, that's basically it. And now I will go over one, but I won't say that it's quote unquote safe, because if it goes wrong, it could totally make the environment collapse around it. And that's nuclear energy. Have you ever heard of Chernobyl?
Chernobyl.
Chernobyl? Well, that place is a uranium, nuclear, radium filled riddle place, and It's so dangerous that nobody can go in it, and they filled it with concrete. Yeah, if you want to go in there, it's strictly forbidden because you get radiation sickness, which is a very, very bad thing that can happen, and it'll basically give you cancer, and it's not a good thing.
I think there's been 3 nuclear meltdowns. There's Three Mile Island here in the
Yeah, I
United
think there
States.
was one in Pennsylvania,
Yeah,
right?
and then there was Fukushima.
Fukushima, which it was bad, and it was caused by the tsunami in 2011, I think.
Hmm.
And then Chernobyl.
Yeah, we actually should let you. There's a really good HBO series on Chernobyl, the miniseries.
There is, and I remember that some firefighter, thought it was a good idea to pick up a glowing rock. Well, that wasn't a good idea. That
Hmm.
was over.
Did you watch that?
No, but it just a really it's a really cool thing, and I thought of watching it, but then I just thought no.
Yeah.
If any of you have watched Radio Girls, you know not to mess with radiation because you know what happens.
Hmm.
Teeth start falling out. You know, it's a lot of things that are bad. You know, back then they thought uranium is a good thing because it can cure cancer, but also it can cause cancer because it will kill the cancer cells. But basically, what happens is that people were literally drinking uranium water, using it for watches, using it for toys, and well, it wasn't. Well, it ended up that exposure to radiation is actually very deadly.
So in summary, nuclear uh, reactions are not a great source of energy, is what you're saying.
Fission. Fission's the bad one.
Yeah.
Now, fusion is a very complicated subject because it's technically better than fission,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still quite as dangerous as fission. You know how the sun works?
Mm-hmm.
Fusion.
Yeah.
Very complex fusion. So you're basically using what the sun uses to power itself. You think that might be a little bit dangerous, Dad?
Could be. I don't know. I know that they're getting longer and longer reactions. They're sustaining longer and longer reactions. I think they just had a pretty long one here. I think a couple minutes. Um,
Oh,
I mean
yeah.
that's long in like they've been working on it for such a long time that they're now starting to make some good progress on reactions and sustaining the reactions for a long amount of time. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But back to global warming, because we're kind of
Yeah, we went tandem.
yeah we went
Basically,
on a
global
tangent.
warming's a real subject. It's also called climate change.
Oh,
And it's not full of hot air. Actually, it's mostly full of hot air.
was mostly it's what CO2. So the way that they measure it, and they've been measuring the
CO2 levels
increased
in the
is the
atmosphere.
CO2 levels in the atmosphere. So there was a buoy I think out somewhere in the Pacific Ocean that they've
Yeah,
been
and the
measuring.
Atlantic and the Caribbean Sea, basically everywhere.
Yeah,
It's
but they've been
warming.
measuring it since the 50s. And so or yeah, the 50s. And then I think they took some ice cores and stuff like that to measure um,
Like
historical.
permafrost. Permafrost.
Yeah, and so with the Industrial Revolution, that's when you started to see CO2 levels spike back in the 1800s. And then,
Yeah, and everybody's been trying to, uh, it's been trying to pin it on which country, like China, India, the U.S.
hmm.
Basically, all of those people are prime suspects.
Yeah, but here in California, like the way that in most of the West, the way that we see most of the effects are wildfires. So
Oh yeah, wildfires and giant rainstorms and cold weather and hot weather.
Yeah,
Very, very hot weather.
and and you and I have talked about this. The reason that and I've told you about this. The reason the fires are getting bigger and scarier. Like number one, the biggest problem is that we've had like 150 years of fire suppression rather than letting fires burn like they're supposed to. Like the natural environment here in California and in parts of like the
Hand
Pacific
raise.
Northwest, they have, they burn every 10 to 15 years, but we don't let them do that anymore.
Yeah, no, like basically the way of how the environment works is that if we let it burn, the more likely the dead stuff will die off easily, and the more healthy stuff will continue living on. Is that
Well,
correct, Dad? You were a fighter.
see, so the way it does is it helps with the nutrient cycle, right?
Yeah, because it
So
fertilizes the land and stuff.
it does. It fertilizes the land, but that's only if it's a low severity fire. So it burns off. To your point, it burns off a lot of the dead stuff or the dying stuff, and then clears it out for the healthier trees and shrubs that can grow back immediately after that. So like perennial shrubs and things like that, they'll burn back to the roots, but then they'll sprout back up the next year after they've burned off. But we
Yeah.
stopped doing that for like the last 150 years. So that's the first problem, which really isn't a global warming issue. But the second problem is
Trust and fire.
yeah, and it's twofold. So because our winters have gotten just a little bit warmer, a lot of the insects that attack trees. It used to be that the winters got cold enough at higher altitudes and things like that that it killed off the larvae and of like beetles and moths and things like that. So the way that their cycle worked is larvae would winter over would they basically their eggs would hatch and the larvae would live through the winter, and then in the spring they would hatch as beetles and whatever, and they'd go fly and lay more eggs and stuff like that. Well,
Yeah.
a larger percentage of those beetles or moths or whatever would die over the wintertime because it would get too cold, they would freeze and they wouldn't survive. But now that the winters are getting warmer and they're just warm enough that they're surviving. And so now that combined with less water in some areas, so like long-term droughts,
Yeah.
the trees are already stressed because they're not getting enough water, and because they're not getting enough water, that makes them more prone to beetle kill or to moths or whatever is attacking them
Yep.
because they're not able to fight those things off as easily. So then you get these huge stands of just standing dead trees, and then it's like a bunch of
And then the fires
matchsticks.
happen, and it's really bad and scary.
Yeah, because then you just basically have a bunch of matchsticks instead of a forest out there because there's all these dead trees, either from water stress or from beetle kill. And so that's why we're seeing these like huge fires out there in the west that nobody can stop, and they end up burning down communities and
Also,
things
can
like
I
that.
say something?
Yes.
Basically, also, winters are starting to get drier.
Yeah.
Like, instead of humid winters, which can make snow layers, which can actually help the environment in some case, they're starting to become drier. But in some places, they're getting more of the abundance of snow, which is also a bad thing. Ever heard the term of too much of one thing's bad is a
Too much of a
much
good
of one
thing.
is bad? Snow acts like a blanket, and it helps kill off bad things when they need to be killed off. Because bad things also have to play a role in every time. But if there's nothing to stop those bad things from continuing, then it becomes more bad, or they don't or the shift becomes basically makes them get killed, which will start an overgrowth, which will sometimes kill the trees under that couldn't get the nutrients, and then those become these giant wildfires, which kills more trees, and basically it's just a doomsday clock.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's fires, and then you're seeing like bigger storms and To your point, you're seeing flooding in places that you normally like that we haven't seen flooding. You will see, when they talk about floodplains and things of that nature, there's a lot of places that they call a 250-year flood, where on average, it's a 250-year floodplain. Well, number one, people have built on a 250-year or a 500-year floodplain, and they don't know that they built on a 500-year floodplain. But the other problem with that is that, and on average, it's supposed to be a 500 years. It doesn't mean that every 500 years it floods. It just means that sometime in that 500-year period, it's going to flood. But what they're finding now in some areas, that these floodplains that are 500-year floodplains are actually, have flooded. Historically, they flooded every 500 years, but now here in the last 50 years, they flooded twice or three times, and it's no longer a 500-year floodplain. So in some places, to your point, you're talking about where they're getting too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about, where yeah, they get a large amount of water in a short amount of time, and then they're flooding out houses and people like that didn't know they built on a floodplain. So
Yeah.
yeah. What else? What else do you want to talk about on that?
Well, I think you explained it pretty well.
Okay, so I
But
guess
the
we'll.
one thing that's been happening in Spokane and Thanksgiving most of the time is wood burning. People are setting up their fireplaces and they're burning so much CO2 in the air that they're having to do a restriction for how much they burn. Now this restriction's over, but still.
So they do have to do wood burning stove restrictions, but that's because of an inversion layer. That's not because that's not for global warming purposes. So essentially, in some of these places like Spokane, where they're in a valley, what you do is you get an inversion layer. So that means that you're not getting wind into the area, and then you get basically you get a layer of cool air down here, a layer of warm air here, and then you get a layer of cool air up here. Either that or I may have them flipped around. But anyways, those layers, what they do is rather than the smoke rising up and out of the atmosphere and up into the atmosphere and being blown away by um, like by winds and stuff like that, it actually can't get out of the valley. So you get this inversion, and instead of the smoke rising and dissipating, it all hangs right down in the valley. And then people with with respiratory illnesses, it makes it really hard for them in the wintertime, and they get into they'll end up having to go into the hospital and all sorts of stuff. So that's mainly why Spokane and some other places they put wood burning stove restrictions, is it because of an inversion layer that sets up inside of
But
the.
here's the thing, I was gonna say something also on top of that,
Yeah.
is that basically giant factories are basically these giant wood stoves.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And basically the earth is a gianter version of Spokane. So what do you think happens when a bunch of wood stoves start doing that? We have too much smog in the air, which can also mean more cardiovascular health issues,
Yep. That was a
which
problem
is
in
really
LA.
bad.
That was a problem in LA in I think the 70s and 80s. They
Oh
had
yeah,
they had
smog.
smog from all the cars. Yep. Yep. Yep, all contributing factors. All right. Well, I think that's probably a good spot to stop on global
And
warming. Do you have any finishing thoughts on this?
nope.
All right, we'll take a quick break and then we'll be back to talk about wasps.
Yup.
All right, and we are back to talk about wasps.
Yep. Wasps. The weirdest thing that we're probably ever gonna go over. Wasps.
Yeah, I don't know much about wasps. All I know is I had a girlfriend once that we told her that there weren't any bugs on the beach when we would go rafting. And then she
And
kind
there
of
were just like hundreds of these giant
was
bugs.
well, it wasn't hundreds of bugs, it was bees. She's like, "You didn't tell me because down here in California, like we have like yellow jackets and that's it. But then the Pacific Northwest, which you'll get into, there's like 3 or 4 different types of wasps up there that you run
And
into,
hornets.
and hornets.
Killer
And
hornets.
well, there's a whole bunch of different ones. And then she started being like, "You lied to me. There's tons of bugs up here, and you have like 80 different types of bees, and they have weird names like the double-faced sapsucker and like all like weird, like all sorts of like." She got like all mad and was like started making up these ridiculous names for wasps, and I was like, I mean, I do see where you're coming from now. Yeah, we don't have them. Yeah, but yeah, she was pretty mad because the beach we had all sorts of. Be
Yeah,
like,
like the
what? She'd be
bald-faced
like, what was
hornet.
that? And I'd be like, oh, that's a mud dauber. And she's like, what the? Yeah,
A mud gobber.
mud dauber.
Uh,
That's the ones. Those are the
that
ones
make mud
that,
forts.
huh?
They're the ones who make mud forts.
They make mud forts, but they're weird looking because they've got that long spindly piece. Like they've got their
Yeah.
main body and then their abdomen or whatever all the way at the
Yeah, and
back. It's like
spindly
long and
legs.
spindly, and then it's got a big butt on the end of it.
Yeah, bald-faced hornets are just white hornets with black bodies, and they hurt really bad.
No. All right. So with that, I'll let you go into like I'm like I only have like one piece of like wasp information. I'll add at the end. But
No, you can add it right
I can
now.
add it now. Well, we were talking about it. It's the wasp. Like I didn't know this, but there's a wasp that like pollinates figs, and like when it climbs up into the fig to pollinate it, it dies there or something like that. And then when it dies in the fig, then the fig absorbs it with enzymes, which is kind of interesting. So there are a bunch of figs that you've probably eaten that have been had a wasp die in them.
I don't eat figs.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot now that aren't pollinated that way. They use artificial, but it used to be that figs were pollinated by these wasps that would crawl up in them, and then they passed away, and then they weren't like you couldn't actually crunch them up and eat them. They were like absorbed as like a nutrient by the fig because of this enzyme. But yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. There's this other parasitic wasp that also is not a parasitic wasp. It's actually the exact opposite. But anyway, the wasp will lay its eggs on a spider. Those eggs release a pheromone that makes it so that the spider will make its web 3 times stronger than it would for itself. Then the spider feeds itself up to the point of where it can't feed itself anymore because it'll bust. And then the eggs hatch. And then, well, after that, the larvae feast on the spider and then fly off into the world to do the exact same thing as their mother did.
Well, almost sounds like what is it? The tarantula hunter,
Hawk wasp.
hawk wasp. We saw
It
one of
does.
those. We saw
It's
one of those
yeah.
when we were in Tucson. Those things are freaking huge. They're like almost 2 inches long and like sound like a helicopter when they're flying by. And
Yeah, I
they're
know.
scary. They're like black with these orange wings, and they're freaking huge. I mean,
They're black and orange, and they're like these giant things.
well, they are. I mean, they've got to be big though to like drag a tarantula into their hole, right? And then lay eggs on it or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then the larvae feast on its flesh.
yeah, yeah. Those things are. That thing was scary. That was like the biggest wasp I've ever seen. And then there was the only other big wasp that I used to see when I was on fire. I don't know what they're. I think they're called a wood wasp technically, but we called them stump humpers. Have I ever told you about stump humpers?
No, that's a horrible name.
It's a terrible name, isn't it? Well, they have another name on fire, but the PG-13 rated version of it. You can think of what the other name is. It starts with an F, but it's a stump humper, and But the reason they call them that is so like right after. Oh, you like stump humper? I think they're actually called like a wood wasp. I'll have to look it up, but yeah, it's because they hump the stumps.
God, don't say that. This is
No, but the
supposed
reason that they're called that is
to
because after the fire burns through and after there's a like a log that has been down in that burn, like the stump, they come in and they've got this like it looks like a long stinger on the end of their rear end, and they go and like stick the long stinger thing down in there and lay their eggs in the stump or on the burning piece of wood. So we call them stump humpers because they can go and like. But they're huge. They're like an inch long. They're like this gigantic wasp. They don't want anything to do with you. They just want to go hump stumps.
Don't say that.
So, tell me more about some of your wasps that you've run into. Those are the two big ones that I've seen.
Yeah, I don't really. Well, have you ever heard of an executioner wasp?
Mm-mm.
Basically, it's this wasp that stinks so bad that it'll like leave a crater in your arm.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, no, it actually hurts so bad. One guy thought it was a great idea to get the just like I forgot what I was talking about. Oh gosh, my short memory.
Talking about the executioner wasp and how bad it
Oh
hurts
yeah,
when there was a dent
they
in the
have
skin.
this horrible sting that'll leave a crater in your arm. If you really like, and this one guy, Wile E. Coyote, his name was. He was like, I'm gonna do this executioner wasp after I've stung myself already with a horrible bee, and I'm done it for comedy gold. And so he made a new video, and that was his last video, and it was just this horrible wasp, and it penetrated his arm, and he got this like crater in his arm for like weeks, and it hurt so bad. Yeah, he wasn't a good one. He's made better videos,
No,
but most of them were bad.
no. What other wasps do you like?
Yeah.
Well, we had up at my dad's place. We've got yellow jackets and then ball-faced hornets. Those things are mean. They actually kill the yellow jackets. I've been on fires before, and like the ball-faced hornets will like attack the yellow jackets and knock them out of the sky and kill them.
Yeah.
They're mean. They're like way meaner than yellow jackets.
Yeah. I heard.
I worked with a guy. We were on a fire, or we were actually marking trees.
Oh,
I
I
think
found the name of that bug. It's the stump stabber.
the stump stabber. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
They should have just called it
What's the
called
real
it.
name though?
Yeah, it's this really weird it's the Ichinomium wasp or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, they're big. Oh yeah, and then there's what are the invasive species one? What's the invasive species that's up in Washington now?
I think it was like the
The
killer
murder
hornets.
hornets, right?
Murder hornets.
Yeah.
God, those
But I think they said they eradicated all those, right? I think I saw a thing that they
still
thought they
living,
killed
and
all
they
of
were
them.
from Japan before, shipments.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah. No, we had a guy with ball-faced hornets. Like we were out marking trees, and then like my boss stepped on the nest because they'll nest in the ground sometimes too. My
Yeah,
boss stepped
like
on the
normal
nest,
wasps.
and then there was two other guys in front of me. They stepped on it. I stepped on it, and then the last guy in the group, we actually when we stopped, he then just stopped right on top of the nest, and we didn't know it.
Oh.
And we looked back after we were talking. He's like, he gets stung. He's like, "Ow, what the?" And he's like, and then he gets stung again.
Ow,
And then you
ow,
just see
ow,
like this
ow.
black like cloud start cutting up around him, and then like we all went running away from it. And he got stung 3 or 4 times, and they swelled up huge. He got like this almost softball size welt
Oh God.
from ball face hornet. Yeah, they're not nice. They are mean. So, you know. What other hornets you want to talk about? Hmm? Or wasps?
Well, that's a. Well, did you know how they mate? Is very interesting. Like when they're trying to do it, trying like normal like paper wasps.
No.
They'll find a female. They'll stab them, and then they'll walk away and find another queen. Stab that queen, and then walk away and find another one. Again and again and again and again, and that's how they make nests.
Hmm. Interesting. I didn't know that. Super cool. Well, is that about all we got on wasps today?
Yep, that's all we got on wasps.
All
Next
right.
up, Waymos.
All right. Yeah, we'll take another break here, and then we'll be going into Waymos.
Yeah.
All right.
Yay.
All right, and we are back for our last section on Waymo, which is you wanted to talk about Waymos. I was in San Francisco yesterday,
No.
um, but I didn't take a Waymo. I ended up walking
Oh, that
rather
must have
than
been treacherous.
No, it wasn't bad. It was good. I was meeting this guy I worked with at Tenable. I worked with when I was meeting him for lunch, but it was like a mile walk, and I needed to get some steps in, so I walked it instead of going because it was a really nice day too. It was hot in San Francisco yesterday, like 70s. It felt like. So, yeah. But anyways, Waymo. How was your experience? Your grandmother didn't particularly care for it. You remember she was like, when we took her in it, she's sitting in the back seat there, and I'm up in the front seat, and like she was afraid when we first pulled out. She was like, Brett. She like wanted me to grab the wheel. Remember, like she like thought that the automatic driving car was gonna mess up, and she's like, just get your hand ready. It was like most like I was like, get my hand ready to do what? Stop the car that's gonna steer anyways. I was like, then I will cause an accident. You remember that? She was like all stressed out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we were just going to the world's largest candy factory,
we were.
with the world's largest gummy worm.
So what was your thought the first time you rode in one?
I think it was fun that they had a radar scanner and a lidar scanner. Those were pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, because you can see
Yeah,
you can see a
you could
couple
see people a block away.
like only almost like at least a
And then
block
you
away.
could also see other Waymos.
Hmm.
That's when we were driving to the giant Target ice rink. We saw like 20 other Waymos. Weemos, I like to call them.
Yeah. Don't if there's a traffic accident, don't hop in a Waymo. Or if there's a lot of traffic, don't hop in a Waymo. You get stuck. They're not good at dealing with like
Yeah,
heavy
and then you made a
traffic.
bad decision by hopping out too quick.
Yeah, it was like what? It was like maybe a mile and a quarter walk, maybe a mile and a quarter walk to get up to the ice rink from the ferry building, and it
Yeah,
took
we were
us
stuck in traffic for a while.
40 minutes, and we finally it couldn't get to where we were supposed to go, and so I finally just had to like give it a pullover spot, and then we were trapped in the car for like another 15 minutes trying to pull over.
Yeah, when it would have been just a minute to get to the ice rink after.
I know. Yeah, it kept going in circles, like it wouldn't let us out. We couldn't open the doors, so it was like that was yeah. But like on good days, like when there's not heavy
Weemos.
traffic and there's not, I think there was also a protest or something like that going on the road I was trying to go down. That was kind of funny because we could see the protests. Remember that? You could see all the protesters like on the radar in the back. Like there's all the people
Yeah,
like walking around. Yeah,
it's like people at Waymos are here, brother.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you think the radar and lidar is cool? Any other thoughts on Waymo?
No, but I really do think that there's like this one thing that Waymos can do that's pretty cool. Separate cars from humans
Yeah, yeah, it knows what it's called.
and Waymos from other cars. And I'm gonna talk. And Waymos are starting to have competitors.
They are. Well, I don't know that there's any competitors like that are
Fully
actively,
launched yet.
yeah, fully launched. But yes, we are seeing some other self-driving cars around here. I
Yeah,
think there might be a couple that are in their pilot, but I don't know what their names are.
maybe co-pilot.
Maybe. I think that's AI.
I know it was a joke.
Oh
It
yeah.
was a joke because those cars are driven by AI
Mm-hmm.
and co-pilot. Yeah, don't think about it too much, or else you might.
It might hurt myself.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think? So, what do you think they're going to use for a car? They like Waymo uses Jaguars. What do you think they're going to use for? What do you think these other? Did you see Elon Musk's one? Like, it's a weird box-looking thing. That self-driving car.
Yeah, it just looks like a giant box car.
Yeah, that was weird.
It looks like somebody had too much juice while they were making it.
So it looks like a gigantic juice box. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It looks like a juice box. I don't know about that.
Yep.
Um, okay. Anything? Any other thoughts on Waymos, or you just wanted to like have a quick mention of Waymos? You just like the lidar and radar that you can see like 2 blocks up, and it actually can tell the difference between like a person and a dog and a car and
Other Waymos of its species?
hmm and other Waymos, and
I
you get
just
to
said
pick
it
your
was.
own music.
Yeah. Although the music's actually a banger.
Yeah, the EDM when they play the
Yeah.
EDM. You like the EDM? I think we were listening to Christmas music last time we were in there.
Yeah. Walking around Christmas tree, have a happy holiday.
Which was fine for the first 15 or 20 minutes, but as we got 40 minutes into that drive, I was like, nope, this is not great. And I can't, and it doesn't just pull over and you can't just get out. It's like, oh, it's
Gotta
like,
find a
I've got to go
spot.
3 blocks away and find a spot to pull over. It's like, no, just pull over right here.
Acted like an actual taxi driver, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not quite there yet. Definitely not a perfect technology. All right. Well, that's gonna
Happy,
be,
happy
I think that's about
holiday.
it for this
Yep.
week. Anything else to add?
No.
All right. Well, that said, I think we'll finish up
Yeah.
our last segment. Have a good week, everyone.
Yep. Bye.
Today's show was produced by Beckham and Brett. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you listen to podcasts. Reach out with any questions, comments, or potential topics. We will respond. Have a great week.